my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and today, man, I want to talk about where we come from, right? I should say, a lot of us, particularly in our culture, and just as like a frame of reference, before I even kind of get into specifically that, I've been writing a new book, and this one's like a full-length book as opposed to kind of the other mini-series I had been doing called Just Be. And the chapter I had just finished working on was the idea of your past not dictating your future, right? Your past does not have to dictate your future. And I'm kind of being a little bit general with some of the descriptors here, so I apologize because I just it's a part of a larger concept, this book, and I don't want to give it away before I put it out there and do the whole shopping thing when it comes to publishers and stuff like that. But I was really moved by this chapter, not like patting myself on the back for my own writing, but in the research process and then sort of just cultivating it conceptually. It was a great reminder for me, right? And I think particularly, and we'll get into this deeper for Thursday Trends, but I can't help but have been really moved by this particular moment that we're going through politically, with Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris being his presumptive replacement as the Democratic nominee to go against Trump for the presidential race. And it just, the optics of it moved me. Seeing a woman of color up there and all the backlash that she unnecessarily gets. And when you think about her career and all the hard work that she put in to get there, and the idea that, like, by all metrics of like our societal standards here in this country, she's not supposed to be there, quote unquote, right? She wasn't supposed to have risen to the prominence she did as an attorney, and then as a presidential candidate, and then vice president, and now presumptively going to be the representative for the Democratic Party for the 2024 election. It's really incredibly inspiring. Like, regardless of politics aside, I think we should all be able to look at the optics of that, particularly if you're somebody from a community of color or a marginalized community. Something like that is incredibly inspiring. And I kind of wanted to touch on a bit of that concept, because I think a lot of us suffer from the idea of imposter syndrome. And I think I've touched on this a bunch in the podcast, but I've had people in my life or people that I work with, and even myself recently. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine like last week, and we were just kind of catching up, and we've known each other for a long time. He's actually been a mentor of mine, one of the people that got me into radio, and kind of helped me get on this path that I've been on, the trajectory I've been on. And I was just sort of like, we were venting to one another about different frustrations we were having. And, one of mine was talking about a particular opportunity that fell through, and it wasn't my fault. And I was expressing to him, just how devastating it was, because I was saying people like me who come from my background, we don't get opportunities like this. And that's why it was particularly disappointing for it to have fallen through for reasons beyond my control. And I've heard this, sort of similar sentiment, even in happy moments, from people I know or people that I work with. Shout out to Coach Bran, who has been a really big help with the whole Just Be movement, and you know, for the better part of like 2 years, has really sort of been my right hand in helping me organize a lot of the things that I'm doing. But, you know, she had recently been given an opportunity to speak at a conference in Los Angeles, you know, her hometown, actually. And it was like, if I'm not mistaken, a conference, you know, related to community outreach, and particularly with schools and children and things like that. And I can remember her commentary of sort of saying, like, I can't believe me, a girl from the hood, is going to be now speaking in my home city and talking to a bunch of like educated people and giving them pointers about community outreach and mentorship and things of that nature, right? Like, not like in disbelief that she was somebody, you know, and she's expressed those moments, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but expressing those moments of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not a college graduate. I'm from a particular area of Los Angeles that is notoriously, you know, rough. Who am I to be in this position, you know? And I've heard that from people I work with in the podcast side of things, you know, people who are like have executive titles talking about how they can't believe they're speaking on a panel amongst like Fortune, I think it was like, not even Fortune 500, the one below it. I can't remember what the category is, the Fortune 100, whatever panel I did like last year. And them having this sort of reflective moment, like, I can't believe I'm here. And I think for many of us, whether you come from a rough background, whether you just come from the immigrant background, right, where we're really just happy to be here and we just want to sort of survive, right? Or you come from a small town, or whatever your circumstance might be, or you made some mistakes in your younger years, right? I think a lot of us get caught up in the environments that we are around, the life that we've sort of been dealt, you know, the hand we've been dealt. And we give it a lot more power than it deserves. And I think we also don't give ourselves enough credit and don't recognize our innate power that we have in every particular situation. And not to discredit anybody's struggle, but regardless of what your struggle is, you have the ability to look at it from a productive mindset, right? And there's a couple things kind of coming up. I think I touched on a few things, but there's a book called, I think it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor. I believe I've mentioned this either in this podcast or the Street Stoke, but, you know, this man was going through one of the most horrendous experiences of mankind's history. And still, he managed to sort of win and survive that situation because he recognized and practiced the idea that you can do whatever you want to my body, you can put me in whatever circumstance physically, but you have no control over my mental unless I allow you to. And he went somewhere else mentally during these atrocious moments that he experienced. Mentally, he put himself in a different place, and it helped him survive this horrendous experience that he was going through, right? And that is, I think, the thesis for what I'm talking about of not allowing your past to dictate your future. And in the book, I highlight two particular sort of figures in entertainment as a means to relate this message, and one of which being Nipsey Hussle, who I talk about a lot, and the other being a country star, ironically, not really a genre I dabble much in, but a country star by the name of Jelly Roll, who some of you may have seen his viral speech that he gave after winning Best New Artist at the Country Music Awards, where he talks about the irony of a 39-year-old man winning Best New Artist. And his quote that I love, paraphrasing, he says, "There's a reason why the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror." And I'll dabble into a few of those different things, but I just wanted to share that because I think this is something we all constantly struggle with, and myself included. No matter how much work I do on myself, it's something I have to remind myself of. Why not me? I am worthy of all of these great things in life, right? Regardless of my background, regardless of the the perceptions the outside world may have of me, of my people, of my community. It's me versus me, and I'm capable of whatever I want as long as I stay the course, as long as I keep fighting. And, in my gut from some of the commentary I'm hearing from people, and again, my own interactions with those close to me, my own words, I feel like it's a good time to remind us of this message. So today we're going to be just diving into all that. We'll have a long Mi Gente segment, basically. So without further ado, let's get into it. Mi Gente. So in the book, I really focus on Nipsey Hussle as kind of the main sort of launching point for this concept of not allowing your past to define you. And again, as with all of these examples, you don't have to know who the artist is that I'm talking about. You don't have to be a fan of their music or whatever. It's merely a story, right? It's like anything else. It's an example to correlate the idea and to bring the idea home for people. But Nipsey Hussle, sadly, is a man who lost his life in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. March of 2019, was senselessly murdered outside of his own business in Los Angeles. But he is somebody who has had a profound impact on my life and I'm sure millions of people around the world because of the thoughts and the philosophy that he lived his life by. He was a very positive person. He was an entrepreneurial person, a very spiritual person, and somebody who literally was dealt an incredibly difficult hand in this life and still somehow figured out a way to overcome all of the darkness to find happiness and success, right? Nipsey is the product of immigrant parents. His father is Ethiopian, from Eritrea, which I believe is near Ethiopia. I apologize if I'm messing that up. Geographically, I know that there's, I believe, a war happening or happened between there. I'm not super educated or well versed, so I apologize for my ignorance there. But he's specifically from a country in Africa called Eritrea. His family. I think his mom is from somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they grew up in a particularly rough part of Los Angeles. I believe they would identify it as like the Crenshaw area. And Nipsey fell into a trap that many people his age from a certain area would. And he got involved in gangs and the drug game very early on in his life, sort of seeing that as his only way of getting out of that particular situation. But he's also somebody who, from a young age, I think, had the mentality of I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to allow myself to just be another statistic. And obviously he had his mistakes, his ups and downs. But there's a story that I love about him where, it's time for like back to school shopping and his mom, I think all she had was like $50 or something like that to give him, right? Might have even been less. But basically $50 to buy all the clothes he would need for the entire school year. So, he went to, a discount place like Ross or Marshall's, because that was all, the best shot he had at making that $50 stretch. And he realized like this isn't going to get him to where he wants to be, right? And he's a young kid, teenager, so of course he like wants to be dressed in like the freshest clothes at the time, which was like Tommy Hilfiger and Polo and things like that. And instead of getting angry or frustrated or complaining to his mom, he understood she was doing the best she could. And he took it upon himself to say, I'm never going to go to school not dressed fresh, essentially, right? I'm going to take it upon myself to make this happen. And as the story goes, he basically went all around his neighborhood to all the businesses asking for a job as like a young kid. I believe it was like 12 or 13 or something like that. Just a super young kid. And everybody turned him down because he was young. And eventually he gets to a shoe shining shop and basically won't take no for an answer. And they give him an opportunity and he gets paid X amount of dollars per shoe that he shines or whatever it might be. And as the story goes, he basically was there like every single day working crazy hours, saving up all his money. And after a particular time period, I don't know if it was the entire summer or whatever, he then had a few $100s to his name and made good on his promise to himself. He went to like the outlets and bought, all the fresh Tommy Hilfiger and all these different things, right? And obviously this is like fun and lighthearted and frivolous, if you will, because we're talking about clothing. But what I want you to focus on is the mindset. He refused to allow himself to be a victim of circumstance. He said, this is what I want. And even though my circumstances dictate I can't, in this case, afford that, I refuse to take that as an answer. I know I have the power to make it happen. And he did so in finding a job and hustling his ass off, right? And really, this is sort of the backbone of the Nipsey Hussle story. Because what's interesting about his story, he's somebody who it took a long period of time for him to find success. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but like in the music industry, man, if you don't find success by, your mid-20s to even your late 20s is pushing it, it's kind of like the end for you. And Nipsey didn't find success until his very late 20s, maybe even early 30s, really, when people really started to know who he was. And his road to getting there was filled with so many trials and tribulations. Again, he's born into an area where really your survival is based upon your gang affiliation. Your only means of making money, really, and getting out of that situation potentially is selling drugs. And, as a result, Nipsey was in and out of jail and had a lot of really difficult moments of like at the times where he even, there's a time period where he said to himself, I'm going to put all my energy into music, right? And him and his brother had gotten out of prison and they scraped some money together and like they went and got a house kind of out of the way, out of their normal neighborhood, right? And during this time, Nipsey sold his car. He sold a lot of his jewelry. He was like broke. He really was saying, I'm just going to be an artist. He put all his money into basically building a recording studio in the house. And that's all he did day in, day out, recording music. And one day the house got raided by the police. And in it, they found a gun that, I don't know, whoever it belonged to. And because, and I might be conflating different stories here, but basically I think at the time he was on probation or his brother was, whatever it might be, they end up losing the house and were, had to go to jail and fight a case. I believe his brother ended up having to go to jail and they had to fight a case. And in that, they confiscated all of his recording equipment. And I think for many people, they would have seen this as a sign from God, from the universe. Like, I, for the first time in my life, went straight. I'm not selling drugs. I'm not doing anything illegal. And I'm just focusing on music and trying to make this happen. And here I am sort of getting fucked by life, essentially, right? But again, Nipsey refused to allow this to dictate his future, right? He has a famous quote, I'm paraphrasing, where he basically says, like, no one can stop me from doing what I want to do except me or God, basically. And there's a lot of stories like this one, him getting signed to a major record label, and then like, or even before that, Dr. Dre was going to sign him, then it didn't happen. This other person, and then the industry didn't want to touch him because of his gang affiliations. And then he finally gets a major label deal. There's all this buzz around him. And then all of a sudden, the label has a shakeup at the executive level, and they no longer believe in the vision of Nipsey Hussle, and they want to make him like work with EDM, produce, and all. It's like his debut album never gets released after it's already recorded and done, right? So many ups and downs that he had to push through and believe in himself through, right? And for me, reading that story, it's a reminder of like, this guy found success against all odds, right? But it's a reminder that the odds are bullshit. The odds have no meaning unless you allow them to have meaning. Right? I mean, and we've seen this in sports where the underdog wins. And that's not a one-off thing. And yeah, there's some truth to it, right? Where it's like, okay, the odds are being made. This team, matches up better against that team. They have better talent, better record, whatever it might be. But there's a reason why we still have to play the game, right? There's a reason why the winner isn't determined based on the odds. It's determined based on the outcome of said game. You still have to fucking show up and win the game, right? And play the game. And on that court, it's anybody's game who's playing better that night. And I think life is really very much like that. And I think that oftentimes past trauma, whether it's our own families, sort of begins to cloud that message of like, it can literally happen to anyone, or your past doesn't have to define you, right? And I've mentioned this a bunch, but like my parents, products of their own environment, didn't believe that people from our background could find success in the entertainment industry, let alone something they truly loved doing, right? I'm talking about myself here. So for a long time, there was a lot of tug and pull about my capability of doing these things, and as much as they wanted to support me, their own past trauma didn't allow them to and made them talk negatively about what I was doing. And a lot of people succumb to that messaging, unfortunately. A lot of us, and I have at different points in my life, allow the negative messaging to seep through and convince us that what we feel in our heart is wrong, or make us doubt our own capabilities at the end of the day. But I want to point out, and I don't minimize how difficult this is, but with the awareness of hindsight here, or just the awareness that we can have by having a general conversation, taking out the personal emotion or attachment to a specific situation, that's the moment that caused us to really fail. The moment that we started listening to the negative chatter. Those are the moments that made us not be capable of all we could be. And they're the moments that allowed our past or our circumstance to define our future. Yes, life is hard, and for some it's harder than others. And yes, some of us might be going through an incredibly difficult fucking time right now. I don't take that away from anybody. But whether it's next week, next year, 10 years from now, with the right mindset, your life could be completely different than it is right now, or than it has been. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you that it's going to be easy or that it's right around the corner. I can't give you that guarantee. And that's particularly why I love somebody like Nipsey Hussle's story. You're talking about somebody who was dedicating over a decade of their life at the highest possible level of like dedication towards a singular goal. And again, it took them over 10 years to achieve what is, recognizable success. So for some of us, myself included, our path is going to be longer. For me, I was just thinking about this the other day. I was making $15 an hour up until I was about 30 years old. Right? I didn't get a full-time, contracted job with a higher salary bump until I was halfway through my 30th year in this world. right? So that was a lot of belief that I had to have in my vision, in myself, and where I think I could take this, right? And the only reason I achieved anything was because I had that innate belief that regardless of the fact that I am, a Puerto Rican kid who is the product of, two working class parents, one of which and my father broke up dead, woke up, grew up dead broke, and my mother being a teacher, in the Bronx. Like I obviously could have been born into much worse circumstances, but also I wasn't born into a circumstance that would say, yeah, this is going to be somebody who's going to live a life of purpose and make his dreams come true and work for himself. There's no clear pathway to that based upon what I was born into. My blind faith is what got me there. And even now I have to have that same blind faith, right? Because I have to find the belief in myself and say this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't luck that I found myself in this position. This is the product of my hard work, my vision, and my talent. And I can continue to recreate that success and also elevate to a higher level based upon all of the factors that got me here. Because I'm defining what I'm capable of. I'm not allowing anybody else to. And truthfully, and even beyond that, right? There are a lot of people who didn't believe that I could be doing these things, didn't see in me what I saw in myself. I could have listened to them. I could have allowed them to define my future for me. But I didn't. And I struggle now, but I still fight to not allow that to continue to be the case, right? And I think that's what's so inspiring about these stories when you think about it, and why I love them so much, and why I like to harp on it. Because anything is truly possible. And as long as you're trying to be better tomorrow, I don't believe anything you've done in the past can really fuck up your entire life, with the exception of maybe some really extreme things. And yeah, I do believe, karma is real and things you do can catch up to you. But I believe that only happens when you don't learn the lesson from them and when you continue to sort of play in the mud, if you will, right? Like on the flip side of what we're talking about, somebody like Diddy, his world is crumbling right now, and his past has caught up to him because he continued to play in that mud for years, right? He didn't, sort of have a negative experience like a Nipsey Hussle going to prison or whatever it might be and then turning his life around. Diddy kept living in that mud. And that's the difference right there, where your past can catch up to you for sure if you don't stop the bullshit and try to course correct, right? And if you course correct, I do believe good things will follow as long as you keep staying faithful to the idea that your life can be different than what it is or what it has been, I'm going to pause here real quick, and then I want to touch on Jelly Roll's story a little bit, because I think it's also really inspiring, particularly for me, but I think anybody listening as well. So we'll talk about that in a second, but we'll take a quick break first, and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I want to touch on the story of Jelly Roll, who, again, you don't have to know who this is to get something from it, but he's a country musician who's now one of the new faces of modern country. And if you don't know who he is, I would Google what he looks like. Because he's not what you'd expect as the face of country music. He is a large dude with face tattoos, wears Jordans, and he himself comes from a background of addiction and prison time. And his story is particularly interesting because he was a drug dealer, and I believe he was surrounded by addicts. I don't remember specifically if he was an addict, but definitely addiction being a part of his life, being a part of the life of those around him, those closest. And he spent some time in prison. I believe his first child was born while he was actually in prison. And he gets out of jail in his mid-20s and begins to really start taking music far more seriously than he had in the past. And for him, his first big break didn't come, again, almost 10 years later, similar to Nipsey, a decade later of doing this. And his first big break was literally like a regional song. And what I also love about his story, again, your past doesn't have to define your future. He started out as a hip-hop artist and then would include singing in some of his songs, and people gravitated towards that. And he sort of began to pivot more into making songs where he was singing, and inevitably became country. He's from Tennessee. And then, again, 10 years plus of trying to do something, has some regional success. On a whim, he is inspired, and I think he had a dream, if I'm not mistaken. Woke up and was inspired by the dream and writes this song called Save Me. And the next day, has to be in the studio anyway. They're like wrapping up final production on an album that he was making. And they record this song, and they finish writing it and recording it all within the span of like 48 hours. And I believe they even shot like a video for it, an acoustic video for it in the studio. And just randomly drop it. And that video goes viral, like crazy viral. And all of a sudden, Jelly Roll is now this big name in country music, right? But again, this is 10 years of this dude plugging away. This is a dude who started out making a completely different genre of music. A dude who his life was trailer parks and drugs and jail time. And I alluded to this at the beginning of the show, but he then is nominated for like Grammys and nominated in the Country Music Awards, CMAs, and wins Best New Artist there. And he stands up there and gives this really fucking inspiring speech. I implore you to go find the whole speech. It's not super long. It's a couple minutes long. But again, talks about the irony of a 39-year-old man winning Best New Artist. Dude, 39 years old by music industry standards is ancient. Particularly if you are a new artist. Like, most record labels wouldn't look twice at you at that age. You're too old to be a star, to be relatable at that point, unless you had previous success. But there he is, 39 years old, winning Best New Artist, defying the odds and the standards and the norms of his industry. And that right there is a lesson in the past doesn't have to define you, right? Or the way things have previously been done or normally done doesn't have to define your success. Because we get tripped up on that a lot as well. Where it's like, oh, I don't see anybody who looks like me doing this thing, or who sounds like me, or who is in my style doing this thing. That must mean it's not wanted or needed. There's not an opportunity for me. And you're dead wrong there, right? If you're doing something and you don't see people doing it in the way that you're doing it, it should fucking be an alarm bell in your head that you're onto something. But again, we've been trained by previous, generations and societal norms of like what's normal, and the idea of our circumstances dictating our lives. At any given moment, no matter what we're going through, we have the ability to take charge of our life and not allow those circumstances to dictate the rest of our life. In that quote that I alluded to, what he said there's a reason why the windshield on a car is bigger than the rearview mirror. Right? Rearview mirror, the little mirror on the top of your windshield. It's important because you do need to see what's behind you. But the higher priority is what's in front of you, right? From a technical standpoint of driving a car, you're going to crash if you're just staring into the rearview mirror. Now, it's important to know what's going on in back of you, right? So the analogy would be, it's great to learn the lessons from the past, to be aware of those things. But once you've done that, once you've glanced into your rearview mirror, it's eyes back on the road in front of you, right? The windshield is where you're going. That's what's important. That's far more important than what's behind you. What's in front of you is far more important, which is why the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. And I think what I was called, something I was called to today in this podcast, I have somebody on my heart that I'm thinking of. I'm not going to call him out by name, but one of somebody who I've met as a listener of the show, and we've stayed in contact through social media, and he reached out to me just letting me know that he's going through a really difficult moment for him and his family right now. And I hope that a message like this gets through to you, and I know you're going through a difficult moment, and I speak to anybody who is, but this doesn't have to define you or where your life is going to go after this. Yeah, it might slow you down. Yeah, you have some shit to figure out and work through. But you can and will work through it. And as long as you have the right mindset, this won't define you. And in fact, one day it's just going to be something that you look back on and reflect on and use it as a teachable moment or a lesson or a moment to say, I'm just so grateful that we moved through that and that I had the presence of mind to not get lost in a negative headspace that would make that moment my permanent reality, or make that sadness, that anger, that frustration I was feeling in that moment a permanent way of being. Because that's what also ends up happening a lot of times. We get caught in frustration, anger, disappointment, or that sort of like, that just feeling of being trapped by your circumstances. And we allow it to become a way of life for us. And I think that's the trap so many people fall into. It's like it's like an elephant. I could fuck up this analogy or the story, but like they talk about how elephant keepers, they have elephants on like these leashes or whatever. And they have them trained to think that these leashes can contain them. Really, these leashes are like connected to a small stake in the ground. An elephant, which is incredibly powerful and just gigantic animal, could easily rip this thing out of the ground if it wanted to. But it's been trained to think that it's stuck in that place, so it never actually tries to. And I think that's what oftentimes happens to so many of us, particularly marginalized communities who have known nothing but pain and suffering for the most part, or have gone through intense traumatic experiences, or haven't seen themselves represented in places of prestige or success, right? We become the elephant who doesn't know its own strength, who doesn't realize that we literally could just rip off the leash that's holding us back, the chains that are holding us back from living the life that we want to live, the freedom that we're longing for. And I think that's what's important to sort of realize. We have so much power in our mentality, the way that we think. We could have so much power, I should say. But oftentimes we relinquish that by giving into the negativity around us. The naysayers, the dire circumstances we've been dealt. We allow them to make us think we are weaker than we actually are. We are more powerless than we actually are. That we don't deserve to be in the places that we know we are capable of being. Somewhere deep inside of us. Or the places we long to be. And I think that is what is trapping and historically has trapped so many of our previous generations of our community. But so many of us still fall into that trap, or even when we're in spaces, we don't give ourselves the credit, or we minimize ourselves because we still feel like we don't belong here. And that's sort of what I'm getting at, and that's why this chapter was so powerful for me, a powerful reminder for me, because I recognize so much of what holds me back is me personally. Now we'll tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
All right, so I hope that was just maybe a reminder that some of us needed, to keep pushing, to have patience, to recognize that all of our journeys are different. Some of us are blessed to find what we've been looking for at a younger age. Others have to wait longer to find said life that they're striving for. But in either circumstance, and even if you haven't gotten there yet, regardless of what age you are in this life or where you are or whatever it might be, you have the capability of getting there. It's just maintaining the mindset that keeps you energized and working towards it, right? Like the thing I keep fucking harping on is it's you versus you, right? It's you versus you. The only defeat can come at the hands of yourself, essentially. You giving up, you relinquishing your power to external circumstances. Outside of that, inevitably, you can win. Inevitably, you can get to a place that you're happy about in your life. But you have to just keep fucking going. You have to maintain the faith, right? Talked about Nipsey Hussle. Dude went through so many circumstances I didn't even get a chance to mention here. Like so many ups and downs, so many moments where he was about to make it and then something happened and it set him back to square one. And he just kept fucking going, kept chipping at it like a psycho, right? Like just this determined psychoticness. And eventually he got there. Jelly Roll, same fucking thing. Like, man, dude is not supposed to be the face of country music, yet here he is. The new face of country music, right? Here he is, though. It's just beautiful. I'm not supposed to be here talking to you. Here I am. And I have so many other things I want to do, and I remind myself, dude, you've got this. And everybody listening, doesn't matter what your past says, what the norms are. You got this. You have the ability to prove everybody wrong. Underdog stories happen all the fucking time. Why can't you be one of those stories? The only answer to that as to why you can't be is because you give up on yourself. If you don't, you too can be bigger and better than the circumstances you were born into, the circumstances that you find yourself in right now. You just have to keep going. And yeah, I know it's easier said than done. It's fucking tough. It's demoralizing. It's heartbreaking when these setbacks happen. But again, it's what do you allow your mind to do in those moments? Do you allow your mind to just give up and to essentially say, all right, life, all right, job, all right, this, blah, 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 this person, I'm going to allow you to now be my ruler and you dictate what my quality of life is going to be. Because that's what you're doing when you give up. You're just saying, hey, all right, fuck it. Let somebody else or something else decide what my life is going to look like. And guess what? They're not going to probably give a fuck much about it, right? Or by you being negative or down or not giving a fuck about yourself, that's how your interactions in this world are going to go. People are going to pick up on that, and you're going to get the bottom of the barrel in every aspect of your life because you have not made the distinction that you deserve more. And it's a tough pill to swallow, right? To reflect back on our life and all that we've seen and all the fucking mistakes and us not being where we want to be. It's a tough pill to swallow and say, I have nobody to blame or place responsibility on but myself. And I can either be angry at that statement or I could use it as a moment of awakening to say no more. Right? And I say this to myself. Yeah, I can blame circumstance, right? I even started this by saying an opportunity fell through that was out of my hands. And yeah, to a degree it was. But there are two things there. In reflection, I could have been a bigger pain in the ass to those people who were dragging their feet and made them make this a priority just to get me off their back. Or B, like I am now, picking up the pieces and saying, all right, I'm going to be quarterback on this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to allow that to be a loss. I'm going to allow it to be a setback. And now I'm going to figure out how to pick up the pieces and rebuild this thing that I worked so hard on. And now knowing what I know, and that I'm going to care about this more than anybody else is going to, moving forward, I'm going to be a fucking shark and a hawk and making sure everybody's doing their job and doing things on time. Right? I could have allowed that moment to break me, but instead I'm making it a fucking learning lesson and I'm moving forward with my life. And that's what I want for all of you going through something. Develop that mindset. Like, that's the only way we're going to survive this thing called life. That's the only way we're going to make the best of it. We have to have this mindset. And don't beat yourself up in the moments that you give in or you cave in. Like, it's awareness. It all starts with awareness. Awareness to the power you have. Then in those moments, you might fall short of what you wanted to say or do. But it's a lesson and it keeps building up that awareness. So in the moment you catch yourself, when you're going down that negative mindset, you flip it and you say, nope, I'm in control. Where's the opportunity? Where's the lesson? That's what it is. Catch yourself in that moment. So I feel like maybe I've been a bit redundant with some of these talking points, but legitimately it's been so obvious to me how important it is to develop this mindset and how so many of us unfortunately haven't been taught that mindset or don't believe in ourselves in the way that we should. And I want to keep reiterating that. So hope this helps somebody out there. If you're going through something tough, I get it. I empathize for you. But it's up to you to get yourself out of that situation. And you can do it. You just have to keep believing in yourself. With that said, thank you all so much for tuning in. I will catch you on Thursday for an exciting Thursday Trends episode. A lot going on. Until then, DM me at DJ Dramos. You want to be a part of the new mastermind, the Just Be Social Club. Again, it's free group membership thing we're doing now. We're building out a real community. I'm really excited. And it just takes all of us showing up. So more messages like this one, private stuff that you won't be able to find anywhere else. So just DM me at DJ Dramos. You want a link to that, and I'll send you the link so you could join our new community over there. With that said, I'll catch you on Thursday. Till then, stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.